Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another Zen podcast. And on this episode today, we're going to be doing a little bit of a recap of SD-WAN, why choose SD-WAN, what's happening in the industry, how it compares to MPLS. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the changes that have been happening in the industry in the last couple of years. And to help the conversation, I've got some guests here. So I'm just going to do some introductions. So we'll make a start with Andy.
Hi, Andy Dickinson. So I work in service development, and I've been heavily involved with a lot of the SD-WAN development over the years from a technical perspective.
Fantastic. Thanks, Andy. Dave?
So I'm Dave Yates. I'm one of the network solutions architects here at Zen. We work with Enzo and other people in the sales team to propose private network solutions to our customers.
Well, thanks, Dave. And Enzo?
Yep, thanks for having me back, Stu. So Enzo Romano, I'm the network sales lead within Zen, and as the clues in the job title, work with a number of mid-market and enterprise customers with some interesting network projects.
Brilliant. And we've had some really interesting stuff happen with customer solutions this last 6 months. We might delve into that a little bit. So I know we've covered this topic before, so we've talked a little bit about what SD-WAN is and how it differs from our IPVPN product at Zen, which is an MPLS technology. It's a good time to do a bit of a recap because there's been some things happening in the industry, and I want to talk a little bit about where that is with regards to what we call the underlay, so the carrier network, and how that's changed. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the technology that sits over the top and how that's changed, because that's going to lead into another conversation we're going to have later on in the series about Cisco and Meraki and how those two companies work together. Just to pick on the carrier side of things and what's happening in the industry, I might come to Enzo first, talk a little bit about what's been happening with altnets. So we hear a lot about altnets in the news. If you follow Richard's vlogs at Zen, you'll hear a lot about altnets. Can you tell us a little bit about what altnets means for business and for customers of corporate networks, Enzo?
Yep, so altnets quite simply is badged as an alternative to the standard OpenReach portfolio of products, and it's gaining a lot of traction in the industry purely because organizations are seeking more coverage, whether that's more bandwidth coverage or greater levels of resilience across their network. And I think the proliferation of altnets kind of ties in with the PSTN switch off and the retirement of legacy products. And equally, as SD-WAN starts to take a hold and, there's more kind of intelligence on the network, products and technologies like copper ADSL really aren't seen as fit for purpose, which is what's driving organizations to, deliver a minimum viable level of performance across their branch network. So certainly from Zen's perspective, we've kind of seen that as a great opportunity to complement our own core network or exchange on net exchange kind of coverage across the UK and deliver hopefully an improved portfolio of performance and resilience options for our customers.
Definitely. I think that rollout of fibre, whether it's through BT OpenReach or whether it's through the altnet providers, that's been accelerating. So I guess, Dave, now there's more opportunity to use full fibre in business in a way that perhaps wasn't the case 12, 18 months ago.
Yeah. And one of the real standouts, I think, about the altnet explosion is the fact that they've been targeting areas where OpenReach don't have a presence yet in terms of the full fibre coverage. And when you look at that map now, you're starting to see, to Enzo's point, driven by the desire for greater and greater amounts of bandwidth as applications become more bandwidth hungry, a real desire to be able to consume more than just from OpenReach's portfolio.
And I guess Enzo, Ethernet's included in this. So we've got altnets providing not just FTTP, it's a subscriber service, but we're able to, I think Zen's now able to have access to altnet Ethernet networks too.
Yeah, exactly. The benefits kind of scale right up to the top of the connectivity tree, which is lease lines, Ethernet. So I think the altnets have certainly understood that that's an important kind of market opportunity to capitalise on. And the same rules apply, don't they? So whether it's broadband, whether it's lease line, the idea around kind of delivering an option which wasn't previously available, either due to a lack of coverage on the OpenReach network or the actual resilience options that are available. So in order, I spoke to a customer even today where BT have their kind of option 2 service, which where possible delivers full separacy, but even that comes with its challenges. Based on the local geography, the potential could be pinch points there. So this is all about choice, isn't it? And potentially there's a for enterprises, especially being squeezed and being demanded to do more with less. If there's a pragmatic way in which we can deliver a level of resilience which is acceptable, but at a much lower price point to something traditional like an option 2, they'll want to explore it. And especially when you're looking at things like this at scale, for one site it might be easy to make a decision, but if you're looking at hundreds of sites, I think customers are interested to hear what we've got to say.
Yeah, it's a good point about value, isn't it? And getting that affordability equation right. And just to help qualify that, Dave, if we talk about BTRO2, resilience option 2, just very briefly, what does that involve?
So I think BT call it diverse Ethernet Plus these days, but everybody still calls it RO2. So sticking with the well-known name, what that essentially is a mechanism to deliver connectivity from the exchange to the customer's premises with as few physical touch points as possible. So you'll have diverse fibre routing down the street. You'll have different entry points into the customer's premises, 2 separate network termination equipment, and 2 separate serving exchange. So we've always described that as sort of the best available in terms of having as few single points of failure as possible. But to Enzo's point, that does come at a cost.
Yeah.
Typically, the biggest issue you see is that there is no physical path from the customer's site to the second exchange, and so the civils costs can mount up quite quickly.
But it's very much the kind of Rolls Royce of what you can get, so I guess it's kind of interesting. And Andy, from the point of view of the technology, I guess because we mentioned stop sell in terms of copper services, that's going to include telephony in terms of copper telephony. And I guess what that means is there's more reliance on the circuit, on the service, than there was a couple of years ago. So, most businesses have moved to voice over IP, but now you very much are in a position where you have to adopt voice over IP, and your business is increasingly relying on this connectivity. So when you've got much faster connectivity as a whole, so fibre connectivity, how does SD-WAN help balance that affordability, reliability equation? So how do we provide that resilience in an affordable way? Does that situation change at all compared to a couple of years ago?
I don't think it's changed so much as that we've got a lot more bandwidth to play with different technology types. So the way we're seeing it being used is that we use mobile technology to back up those primary services, which might be an Ethernet circuit or an FTTP circuit with high bandwidth. But we're using a mobile data connection or multiple connections to provide that resilience. Because the bandwidth is much greater now, there's not... When we used to do IPVPN MPLS networks, we used to be constraint around bandwidth, and it's quite difficult to get the amount of bandwidth that was required. So we use technologies like QoS to provide the quality of service and assurance for the voice services. Now we've got way more bandwidth, and the difficulties around making sure we use the best quality bandwidth for the services that are in play, and that's where SD-WAN comes in, because it's intelligent enough to realize which is the best path to use for a particular application. So that's the way we're seeing it being used, and also the flexibility nowadays. So we're seeing a lot of requirements for short-lived services. So they might only be for a few months or 6 months or even 12 months, rather than what it used to be 3 years, quite static. So I think that flexibility and the ability to use any type of technology to connect those services is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess generally, those services are much faster, so they're driving more performance. That has implications for the hardware, I guess, and also having some kind of parity with the resilience. So a long time ago when we started doing MPLS, we would use DSL as a backup to, say, an Ethernet circuit. And there's a kind of ratio that's reasonable to have a lifeline service. I guess the services get faster and people are more reliant on them. Keeping that parity, if you've got a backup circuit in play, that's important. So if we're trying to protect a fast fibre circuit, what options do we have to keep that parity in play to make sure that if there's a failover, you can continue to operate?
Sometimes it requires a compromise so that you prioritize the business critical traffic above your bulk data transfers. So you want to keep the business operational. So it's about identifying which applications are most important to that particular site and customer.
And I guess there's in terms of raw performance, I know we've started, Dave, doing a bit more with, quite a lot more with LTE 4G services. And I guess 5G is going to give more capability if we're doing kind of that kind of out of band or that diversity where we're not using the kind of Rolls-Royce service, but we're going to say, well, okay, we've got a fibre service here and we've got a 5G service here. And how have you seen mobile data adoption generally in this kind of framing?
Well, 4G or 5G, LTE backup is really, really popular because it's easy to deploy. It's pretty ubiquitous now, and it's relatively inexpensive compared with years gone by. It still has its challenges, though. If you've got a router sat in a comms cabinet in the basement, probably not going to get a great signal. So there are still design constraints to work around. But mobile backup, especially to Andy's point about critical lifeline services where SD-WAN can offer some intelligence in terms of which applications are used for what, is a real game changer, I'd say, over the last few years.
And that ability to provide the intelligent routing, that kind of policy-based routing, that's something that helps distinguish SD-WAN from MPLS. I think it might be a good time just to recap what those key differences are if you're contemplating making a move from an MPLS-based service, if it's IPVPN or if it's with another business. Enzo, what from a business benefits point of view, what's the high-level view of how SD-WAN provides those advantages and those benefits?
Yeah. So I think it's kind of more well known now, isn't it? The benefits of SD-WAN, it is around the fact that it's embracing that internet first way of working. They're kind of following the trend of more and more traffic now being consumed directly from the internet through specific software as a service, public cloud services type applications. And also the fact that you can be more intelligent in the way you route that traffic, both over the primary and the secondary link. Probably an interesting point as well that I just wanted to pick up from before, actually, around the kind of failover scenarios. And it kind of ties in with more of a legacy way of working, the IPVPN. I think customers are also getting wise to their applications, and maybe that is coincidental, or maybe it does actually tie in with SD-WAN and the kind of new world and the way networks are actually designed. But I think going back 10 years, there was an expectation when you asked around resilience, the customer generally used to say, well, we need scenario B to replicate scenario A. There's no compromise on it. And actually now, I feel like there's much more reasonable conversations taking place and understanding from the customer's side to say, actually, we understand our application stack a lot better than we used to, because it's not just chucking all traffic at a network. And actually, we can have a much more informed discussion around what matters to us in that failover scenario. So I thought it was just worth raising that point, that I think as much as an MSP we've matured and understood the market, I think customers have also started to also mature in terms of their expectations of the service.
Yep.
So it's around cloud first, it's around resilience, it's around improved levels of reporting, to allow and arm the IT teams and operational teams with knowledge around how their networks are being utilised, so they can have more informed discussions with the managed service provider, but also internally with senior stakeholders. So I would say those are the three key areas where SD-WAN brings benefits.
Thanks, Enzo. And slight risk here. I'm gonna break the marketing fourth wall and talk a little bit about the real world. So because we've had an opportunity really to step back and look at how customers are benefiting from and using this technology. Because how long have we been? When did our first customer go into service, would you say? Because I've lost track of time.
In SD-WAN, it's probably about 5 years.
About 5 years. Yeah.
So it's a good amount of time.
Yeah.
So from your point of view, as both architect and an engineer and implementer, how have you seen the customer's experience of that over time? What's it been like from a customer's vantage point, Dave?
For me, I think the biggest shift in perception and awareness has been a move from, I think, the initial expectation, which was SD-WAN is cheaper than MPLS, driven, I think, at least in part by marketing collateral from the US, where there is a very big delta between MPLS connectivity prices and DIA connectivity prices, to being much more focused on the value of that an SD-WAN can bring. And that value is largely driven by the benefits that, the extra features and functions that SD-WAN can provide that that MPLS IPVPN cannot. So far from now, in most cases being a case where a business is looking to save money by going to SD-WAN, they're looking to enhance their operations.
Yeah, definitely. I think the one of the things I remember is when SSP came in and we recorded a podcast of SSP, and the three things I remember from that were, the security angle, because there's this consistency in terms of how we deploy things, and there's security inherent in that. It's more performant because we've got ability to utilize all the resources, all the networking resources. We're not just doing active passive. And the visibility. I think the network insight that we provide is really valued by the customer. Well, from your perspective, Andy, how have you seen SD-WAN perform in the real world?
I think it's performed as we'd hoped it would. I think the benefits that the customer's seen in terms of performance seem to be around decentralization. So because historically everything was funneled through a central location to get to the services, the internet or whatever it might be, there's always a constraint there. And if you started to increase the amount of data that you wanted to push through the network, you had to focus on this thing in the middle and make it bigger. And now, because everything is autonomous, you can break out locally, and a lot of your bandwidth goes out locally. And what customers are seeing, and they're quite surprised about, is how much traffic actually goes to the internet versus to the other locations in the network. So we tend to put a graph on our homepage that shows you the ratio of internet direct traffic versus overlay, local traffic in your local network, and it's usually about 75-25 on average, where 75% of the traffic goes direct to the internet, which gives the customer much more efficiency, because the traffic from that particular site, if it's Windows updates or Microsoft Teams, will get directly to the location which is best serving that site. So I think the performance and the perceived performance for a user's perspective has increased since SD-WAN's been rolled out.
Yeah, and the good thing about this feedback is it's real world feedback, right? So this is interacting with customers, seeing how the service is performing, getting their feedback, and there's a genuine improvement. I guess probably the last thing I wanted to point out before we kind of do a bit of a wrap up and summary is some of the other trends in the industry, and I guess the one I wanted to kind of single out was security. And we've had customers talking to us proactively about security and things they've heard about in the industry. So I'd heard about VPNless was one of them. ZTNA was another one. And of course, what's driving a lot of this is all the stuff in the press. So we've heard about things like what's happening with Marks and Spencer's, what's happening with the co-op, and that's driving a lot of interest as well. And I know Cisco is investing a lot in security. We also have other partners involved. We have Fortinet. We use Fortinet for security as well. So we've got a good spread. What are some of the trends in terms of the technology? Because I know we'll have a follow-on around security, but what are some of the key areas that are worth pointing out in terms of how the technology's changed?
For me, I think what a lot of customers are preoccupied with these days is limiting the amount of east-west traffic. And when I say east-west, I mean from site to site or from site to data center. And there's two aspects of that. So first of all, is the fact that there's an architectural consideration. So SD-WAN being by default spoke to hub. So you don't get site-to-site traffic, which can potentially, ease the spread of an infection or a compromise. And then you've got what I would call sort of a role-centric access policy for applications if they have a data center or any sort of application hosting, being able to control access on a per-user basis to applications also helps limit the potential damage that could be caused by any sort of compromise. It's just really, and that's where the ZTNA, Zero Trust Network Access, comes in, providing users with access to only the things they absolutely need when they need them.
Yeah. And I guess there's a theme here, Andy, around control and the granularity of that control.
Yeah, I think identity management is going to be key to all this. So how do you know someone is who they say they are? And you can't implement something like ZTNA until you can verify a user is who they say they are. And I think it's also going to be about how we implement that end to end. So how we authenticate users as they connect to the network, across the network, giving them the same behavior and the same posture no matter where they connect, whether they're at home, in the office, or mobile. We need to give them the same capabilities and the same controls. And I think to do that that underpins ZTNA and all the new technologies. So there are mechanisms that we can use to deploy to do that, but it depends on your infrastructure, how you currently use things like Active Directory to authenticate your users. So there's lots of moving parts to it, and it's quite fluid, but there's a lot of interest in it.
Yeah, there is for sure, and I think that it's seeing security as a framework where in the past it could have been a singular technology, and in terms if you went back 10, 15 years, it was the network perimeter firewall, and that's what you were presented with as part of your IPN, your IPVPN. And you're right, there are more moving parts, and that's where I think you need expertise and help to bring all this together and integrate it. Because the point you make about all that internet bandwidth that's going to the internet is, I still want to see what that is, right? I still want to understand what that is. And maybe the network's not the right place to get that information. Maybe it's the cloud, maybe it's the application environment it's going to. So being able to synthesize all of that into a common view, it's very much what the industry wants to try and achieve with that. So I think it's a good place to have a wrap up. I'm going to turn to Enzo to talk about some of the next steps. If you were an IPVPN customer, an MPLS customer, contemplating a move to SD-WAN, what's the best way of approaching that, Enzo? It's probably worth mentioning that from a Zen perspective, we are stop selling. We are going to sunset basically our IPVPN products. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Enzo, and what your advice would be to people who are looking to make a move?
Yeah, I think reach out to us. It's as simple as that. I think, there's an SD-WAN landing page on our website with all the relevant contact details, email addresses. So start a conversation. There's a lot to unpick. Sometimes it can feel like there's a lot to unpick as part of that transition, but we're absolutely here, both from a commercial, technical and engineering perspective to support and really simplify that process into a tangible project that we can run together. So that would be my advice.
Definitely. Okay. Well, that's really helpful. Well, I think we've done quite a good job of just doing a bit of a whistle-stop tour of what's changed. As Enzo says, if you are interested in learning more, please get in touch. There's a lot of expertise on tap and a lot of experience on tap as well. So with that, I think it's a wrap. Thank you for your time, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.